Hi, folks. Happy Tuesday. I'm here with Carson Martinez. Let's get Carson nicely in the picture there.
Hello.
Carson helps lead our health privacy working group and has been coordinating the effort here at FPF with a number of leading companies, Ancestry, Helix, 23andMe, Habit, and a few others around consumer genetics, right? That's the sending in of your DNA to learn about your heritage, to do testing and perhaps learn about possible risks that you may have, changes you might want to make, or some of the companies even will offer things like, here's the wine that some research shows your palate might really appreciate based on your DNA. So from entertaining to perhaps critical for health, to interesting information about your genealogy and super popular. Millions of these tests now being sold. Last year, there were even people giving them as holiday presents, so it's really mainstream. Clearly, however, if you're somebody who works in privacy and data protection, in addition to recognizing the interest and the benefit, which can include as well being offered the opportunity to participate in research. A number of the companies will go back to consumers and ask them permission. Would you like, here are the risks, but here's the way researchers, could be pharma companies, could be academic scientists, here's what they're looking to study to try to come up with cures for rare diseases or for other information. So Carson with the group helped pull together a set of best practices because there are privacy concerns. So let's talk about some. We talked about the benefits, right? We're interested. It could be incredibly useful information. It could be entertaining information, but there are obviously privacy risks as well. What are some of the privacy concerns?
Well, genetics is a really interesting type of data as it's not only extremely sensitive, but can also have implications for family members or future generations and can reveal quite a bit about your heritage or your health information. So in order to address those issues, we created these best practices to provide better protections for consumers, not only to have them more aware and to enhance transparency, but to also provide more choices and protections for them.
So to make it very basic, right? If you do a genetic test, you did, as our guinea pig, Carson sent in her information to a number of the companies to see how everything worked. Your results reveal information about your parents, your siblings, your cousins, because we share, DNA. So It's not just your privacy, you're enabling information about a wider scope of people, and that's something that's important to understand.
Yeah.
What do people possibly worry about? I mean, you give in your data to companies, obviously everybody wants good security, so we have security commitments in there, but what are the other kinds of things that somebody might worry about?
I think the largest one is discrimination. So there is a law in the US called the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, GINA of 2008, that protects people from discrimination based off their genetics in the employment or health insurance section. And so that's a big issue people think about. And when I'm doing these tests, is that data potentially going to my employers or to my health insurers? And we make sure that that does not happen at all in the best practices unless there is explicit express consent.
We also have important protections like the right to delete your data, the right to access it. If you're going to submit data for someone else, like a kid or a parent, that you clearly have the rights to put that data in there. If a company wants to do something different, let alone share it, we clearly need you to very specifically agree to share it. But if a company wants to do something very different, something that's incompatible, there as well, you need
express consent.
Additional permission. So we think there's some really strong commitments in here. What about law enforcement access? I mean, that's definitely been an issue. People probably saw the Golden State Killer, where the open GED match was used. Can that happen here? And what's in the document and in the practices of the companies that prevents that sort of thing from happening?
Right. So the California Killer or Golden State Killer case with GED match was a really interesting one that blew up in the media. That is an open source research platform that people can submit their genetic data to. So it's a little different than the companies we are dealing with. But even so, in order to ensure that doesn't happen, we in the best practices have included a lot of protections to make sure that the type of searches that was done in that case cannot be done today with these companies. So number one, we make sure that companies are producing transparency reports on at least an annual basis.
So we know if the cops or others are actually looking for this information.
Right, so how many requests they got, how many they agreed to, all of that information is provided to consumers publicly. The other thing we require is that consumers who are uploading their genetic data, they have to either be, number one, the owner of the genetic data themselves or the biological sample, or they must have the express consent of the person whose genetic data it is in order to give it to the companies. In the GED match case, we know that law enforcement uploaded the genetic data from a crime scene under a pseudonym. So to get around that, we require it to be the owner or to have the express consent.
So to be clear, when law enforcement has a warrant, go to a judge, there's a crime, and we have a reasonable suspicion, the law enforcement has reasonable suspicion that a particular person could be responsible, of course companies have to and should be cooperating in a civil society. But the notion that the cops should be able to sweep through, an entire database looking to see if there's a match, you know what, that's the same as perhaps the cops going to a stadium or a crowd and kind of just getting everybody's, DNA by, collecting the tickets afterwards or just sort of, capturing it from people's seats because maybe somebody who we're looking for at a crime scene is in there, right? That is a wide search, and the courts typically don't allow that, and the companies commit to pressing to ensure that law enforcement has valid legal process. Lots more. We urge you to take a look at the principles. Our team will post a link, certainly your thoughts. It's a best practice, so hopefully it'll evolve as new business models. It's a new area. New issues will arise, new uses of the data that hopefully will be beneficial to consumers. If you're a consumer, take a look at the tips that we've put out for the kinds of things you should be looking for when you decide which company to use. Carson, great work.
Thank you.
Team, and thanks to our colleagues at Ancestry, at 23andMe, at Helix, at Habit. The privacy leads there really were great in working with us. Others who signed on as well included MyHeritage,
African Ancestry,
African American Ancestry, and there's one more.
Family
Gene by
Tree.
Gene,
Yeah.
Family Tree DNA.
Yep.
Thanks all. Happy Tuesday.